Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I just got this in the mail today. I'm going to blame this on Kasha. She did a video on sort of, like, basically I think it was her favorite Oracle decks. A couple, now I will say, I will spread the blame, because a lot of people have actually, I recommended this to me, like on live chats and things, and I keep writing it down, and I've looked at it briefly. The artwork and like the setup of the cards didn't really appeal to me, but it was interesting to me. And then when I saw Kasha's video, I thought, okay, it was $11 on Amazon. It retails for $19.95, but I got it off of Amazon for $11. I thought I'm gonna have to give this a try. So this is a Hay House. Oh, it's very tight. I've taken the plastic off, but I haven't opened the box. I do love Hay House boxes, but boy, this is a snug one. Hopefully that breaks in a little bit. It has a brown, so we have sort of an orange and brown theme going on. I do really love Hay House boxes. A little white book that we'll look at here in a second. It is about 104 pages. So we will look at this in a second. And then of course it has the cards, which are not gilded, which I am happy to see, because generally I have had bad luck with Hay Housey gilding. More mass market gilding seems to just cause problems with the cards. So I'm happy to actually have it not be gilded. So this is the backing of the cards. It's thin cardstock. But not bad. I mean, it probably will shuffle. This is an 80 card deck, so it needed to be a little bit thin so that it could be manageable. These are blank cards. It comes with 5, 6, so 6 blank attributes to be able to, blank cards to be able to add in your own archetypes that are important to you, which I quite like, because I do have some very specific archetypes that if aren't in here, I would want to have in here. So it does have that. Obviously the backs are not reversible. You're going to be able to see, if you do the reversals, you're going to be able to see that, but that's not something that really bothers me. I'm going to put these blank ones back into the box for now. So let's take a look at the book really quick so we can see what exactly these are. You know what? I probably shouldn't do that because it's going to take me a wrestling to get it out, but oh well. So this is based off of Jung's archetypes. And he's not the only person, I think, that uses archetypes, of course. So she talks about, I'm going to read this little section here at the beginning. Archetypes have been around since at least the time of Plato, who referred to pre-existing ideal templates as forms. Plato believed that these eternal forms were reflected in material objects. The form of beauty, for example, is abstract and applied to all beautiful things. As different as individual manifestations as beauty may be, a beautiful person, horse, or flower, the form itself never changes. Other philosophers referred to the concept in passing, but it was the 20th century visionary Swiss psychologist Carl Jung who put archetypes on the map of modern consciousness. In essence, most archetypes are psychological patterns derived from historical roles in life, such as the mother, the child, the trickster, the prostitute, the servant. They can also be universal events or situations, such as an initiation or death or rebirth. Along with our individual personal unconscious, which is unique to each of us, Jung believed that there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature that is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious, as he calls it, is inherited rather than developed and is composed largely of archetypes and mythological figures. And the idea of the collective unconscious is one that is, and archetypes are very, very strong for me. Now she goes into something also to do with sacred contracts, the agreements you make before you're born to learn lessons. That I don't, I watched a couple interviews with her, and she sort of has her own thing going on around that, and I'm not really speaking to that in this video because I don't know enough about it. I don't resonate with everything that I saw on top, but on a surface level, but I don't know enough about it to speak about it. But I do think that these cards, just in terms of using of the archetypes, is going to be quite interesting, and something that I was, of course, interested in. So, so it goes on to talk about sort of the idea of the contract, and I'm not really, again, I would need to read that more thoroughly before I get used to it, because you actually go through and decide like your 12 primary archetypes and that kind of thing. So it's much more of an individual work versus using it as an oracle deck, and I am not so much interested at the moment in using that, although I will be reading about it, and we'll try to make sure to do an update video once I do that. But it goes through for each of the card. It gives what the archetype is, some keywords, some reminders, like, so for addict, it's not just drugs, alcohol, food, and sex. There is addictive personalities that doesn't necessarily have to do with those main ones that we think about. It helps you recognize when an external force has more authority over your willpower than your inner spirit does. Perseverance in breaking its hold empowers your psyche. Shadow addict represents the absence of self-control and internal balance and compromises your integrity. And then it gives you a suggestion like, look for a lifelong pattern of trying to overcome the tendency to need a substance or a person so intensely that you compromise relationships, finances, integrity, character, or emotional and psychological well-being. And so it gives this for each of the cards with an image of the cards themselves. I don't think there's any spreads in here. Let me look. No, it doesn't look like there's any specific spreads here, but this, I think, would lend itself very well to spreads of different kinds. I know that Kasha has. I don't know if she's done a video on her spread or not, but again, I think this would be cards would be quite easy to use in conjunction with a variety of spreads. But we'll see. As I said, I really didn't go in too deep. I've been recommended this a few times, and then off of Kasha's, this was one of her main decks that she used. I thought, you know what, for $11, I am going to take a look at this. So that's what I'm kind of just winging this one, which I don't generally do. I generally have really researched something well, but today we are going to be winging it. Now these appear to be, yes, so these are in alphabetical order, and you can see the way that they're set up. They have an image in the middle. They have the archetype name at the top, and then they have right on the card the light attribute and the shadow attribute, excuse me, so that if this was in shadow or was in light, and this is not upside down, so you don't have to use it reversed. Depending, you know, you could have actual in your spread to indicate whether something is in shadow. Also, it also depends on the question, right? That tells us if something is in light or shadow. Now, of course, I use the terms light and shadow, so I quite like that that's on directly on the card rather than like reversals or that type of thing. So I do quite like that that has that. Now let's see if she talks about light and shadow. She does say all archetypes have shadow manifestations as well as positive aspect. The rebel, for instance, can be a powerful force leading you to reject illegitimate authority and strike out a bold new path. But if you let your awareness lapse, its shadow aspect can induce you to rebel against constructive and positive leaders, or to fall in love with the image and trappings of rebellions. So the queen can help you assert your power, but it can also let you run around barking out orders and being overly aggressive. So it recognizes that each archetype has both positive and negative, or light and shadow attributes. And so that's quite interesting all by itself, because it understands that these kinds of things. The both perspectives of all these different archetypes. So our first one is ADDICT, and we see that in light, the light attribute helps you recognize and confront addictive behavior, while in shadow, it compromises your integrity and honesty, and it allows an addictive pattern to have authority over your inner spirit. And I won't do all of these where I'm reading them, but let's just kind of get a feel for these cards because I've not really ever seen these. So here we have the Advocate. So this is a person kind of healing a tree in a way, or putting care into a tree. So that person who's advocating for somebody else. So in light, this inspires you to put compassion into action. In shadow, it can have you embracing negative causes or doing things, doing compassionate things out of personal gain, or something that's going to lift you up and make you look good, that kind of thing. Here we have the Alchemist, which is the transformation of base motives and goals into golden wisdom, but you can misuse the power and knowledge that comes out of a spiritual practice if it's in shadow. Here we have the Angel archetype. Obviously, in light, it's helping those in need with no expectation of return. In shadow, you can act innocent or angelic, or falsely claim to be in touch with angelic guidance. Here we have the Artist, which expresses a dimension of life that is just beyond the five senses, inspiring others to see life symbolically. Or you can use it as an excuse to mistreat others, or to pose as the starving artist to elicit pity. So you can kind of play into the archetype of the starving artist in your personality, or you can simply be an artist. You know, there are different ways in which to express that archetype. Here we have the athlete, transcending physical limits, including handicaps, and you're really pushing willpower and strength of spirit. But you can do that for selfish ends, or it can have a false sense of invulnerability and entitlement. You know, look at me, I'm fantastic, I'm, you know, the best person there is, the best runner, the best whatever. Yeah, so it can have that sort of attitude as well. So you think of maybe even the Six of Wands in reverse. Here we have the Avenger, that superhero archetype who is balancing the scales of justice. But what about resorting to violence in the name of a cause? So that they had this Avenger question, didn't they, in Batman versus Superman movie recently, where that understanding of, okay, but if you're doing causes and saving people, but in the meantime killing a whole bunch of other people, like, is there a problem here? And so that's kind of that archetype there. We have the Beggar. Confronts empowerment at the level of physical survival, awakens the spiritual authority of humility, compassion, and self-esteem, versus being dependent on others to the exclusion of effort. So there's a little bit of a difference, right, between, say, a Buddhist monk who, in pursuit of their spiritual path, cannot take anything that isn't given to them, and so they are given food. They have to, in a sense, kind of have their bowls out for food, because that is part of their spiritual path, versus somebody who maybe is standing at the corner, and versus getting out and working, they're standing at the corner and using beggaring as an actual job. So there's a difference there. There's a light and there's a shadow aspect. Here we have the Bully archetype. So what it can highlight is your tendency to intimidate others and help you to confront the fears that are causing you to be the bully. In shadow, it can conceal those fears behind verbal or physical abuse. So you can either use this to highlight the way that maybe fears are making you act out, versus just having those fears completely subsumed and acting out anyways. Here we have the Child Divine. So I think there are different so there are several child archetypes. The Divine Child, the Eternal Child, the Magical Child, the Nature Child, the Orphan Child, and the Wounded Child. So while the divine child would be about innocence, purity, and spiritual connection, its shadow would be, you know, the complete inability to defend themselves, because they're just at such pure innocence that they don't even, you know to defend themselves. The child eternal is just that Peter Pan complex, right? You stay young, which is a good thing, but if you can't ever grow up and be responsible, that has problems of its own as well. The magical child is seeing the potential for sacred beauty and magic, I would guess, in all things. But if it's in shadow, this is a little bit more opposite, that there is more pessimism and depression and not believing in the magic that is in the world. The nature child, friendship with animals, communication with nature spirits. If it's in shadow, they abuse animals and people and the environment. So some of these are more what I would think of as reversals, whereas some of them are more how the same attribute might work in different ways. So that's quite interesting to see those differences there. The orphan child is independence based on learning to go it alone and conquering fear of surviving, but then you can also have abandonment issues. And again, I'm shortcutting a lot of these just so we can get the idea of it without spending a ton of time on it. The wounded child awakens a compassion to help other people and also go towards forgiveness. The shadow blames all problems on these childhood wounds instead of moving on through forgiveness, where you can have more healthy relationships later on. Here we have the companion archetype, loyal, tenacious, and unselfish. You can misuse confidence or lose your identity in another person. And that's not just with, lovers or love relationships. That can be in friendships and lots of other different kinds of relationships. The damsel in distress archetype, right? That would be the shadow aspect. But you can understand healthy romance and have that inspiring you to rely on yourself, but still have a healthy appreciation for relationships. Or are you just going to sit and wait for somebody else to come and save you and have that sort of romantic illusion stay in place too long? We have the destroyer, which can be good. You can release what is destructive. You're just going to blow out the top. That's going to allow you to release stress and anxiety. I had a counselor once when Michael was in palliative care who said, when you are stressed out, you think of yourself as a pressure cooker. And so when you are really stressed and you're ongoing stress, the space between the top of the pressure cooker and what's in there is very small. Way up here, you can't even see me. You have this very small space, and so you have to release the pressure more often because you've got this buildup constantly going. And it was a really good analogy for me. It taught me to make sure in really high stress moments that I was doing things to release that pressure gauge. So sometimes it's good to blow off pressure and steam, right? But in a negative sense, that can be intoxicated with destructive power, and destroying other people's dreams and potentials would definitely be shadow. Here we have the detective archetype, great powers of observation. So we have, the great detective archetype that we see. In shadow, it can be falsifying information or voyeurism. I could think of other things to be in shadow with the detective, because it's good to be observant, but you could be so focused on details that you miss the bigger picture. Like, you kind of have to think of other ways. These just get you started in thinking about ways in which these things might be in light or shadow. Here we have the dilettante. This is about somebody who is delighting in the arts. They are kind of good at everything. They don't really have a profession. But you can have in shadow to pretend to have a much deeper knowledge than you actually have. So that kind of person who maybe has lots and lots of pursuits, but maybe not any deep knowledge in any of them. The Don Juan archetype spotlights your positive, seductive qualities, or you can use that power for private agendas and in a negative fashion. The engineer, the ability to give creative energy to a practical expression, which is a good thing, something that we need. But if you're too reliant on mechanistic solutions, and you can kind of separate yourself from your emotions. Here we have the exorcist archetype, freeing yourself and others of destructive impulses. Or you could be afraid to face your own demons. So again, that's not so much a reversal as how are you going to use that energy? Are you going to use it to get rid of things, or are you going to be too afraid to face it and take care of your demons? Here we have the father archetype. Talent for creating and supporting life, guiding, positive guiding light, but they can also be dictatorial control and abusive authority, because of course everybody has different experiences of what the word father means. And so that's one of the reasons I found things like Wild Unknown Tarot that don't have people in it can be actually really helpful, because sometimes, even though it does say mother, father, but being associated with animals, like not everybody has positive experiences with the mother or the father or any other family type archetype, and so it's quite interesting to have that. Here, of course, we have the femme fatale. It has the erotic energy of the feminine, which isn't a bad thing, but it can be inappropriate use of sensuality and then things along that nature. Here we have the fool. Fearlessly revealing emotions, helping people to laugh. So this is more like the fool, the jester, not like the tarot fool. But when you use humor to wound and you use it to mask your own emotions, that can be a whole nother thing. The gambler, someone following intuitions, following your gut, or relying on luck rather than actually doing work. The God archetype. Benevolent, compassionate, the eternal force within yourself, or using power to control people. It's always that big issue with religion, right? Is it being done to answer those spiritual questions we all long to search for, or is it being used as a method of control? The goddess, we have the feminine expressed through wisdom or exploitation of the female nature and form. The gossip awakens consideration for feelings of others and honoring trust if it's in light. In shadow, it thrives on the power of passing on private or secret information. The guide represents the nature of the divine in life and in yourself, or it can place financial gain and control over imparting spiritual insight. So we're using these that archetype of being a spiritual guide in a positive way or in a negative way. The healer, same sort of thing. The passion to serve others, repairing body, mind, and spirit, or are you taking advantage of people who are in need of help, or also failing to take care of yourself? The hedonist. So this is that, I just of course thought of the Boheme song from La Boheme from Rent. Celebrating the beauty in yourself and then the good things in life, or are you pursuing pleasure at the detriment of your own health or indulging at the expense of others? The hermit, seeking solitude to focus on the inner life, or are you withdrawing and kind of barring yourself off from others and refusing to help other people? That can go either way. This is one of my strong archetypes that I can use in both ways, and I have to watch myself where I'll start here and it can go into kind of being withdrawn. So it's that I always have that back forth with this archetype. The hero and the heroine, a passion for the journey of personal empowerment, or are you escaping and having a false sense of that? Here we have the judge, which can be good, balancing justice, or are you having destructive criticism or misusing your authority? We have the king, enlightenment, benevolent leadership, or are you entitled, or are you having rulership without restraint and becoming a tyrant? The Knight, who has those attributes of loyalty and romance and chivalry, because this again isn't talking about the Knight in tarot, it's talking about the Knight archetype that we see in stories and such. Shadow could be having allegiance to somebody that's destructive and having delusional thoughts about romance, which we definitely also see in some of the same stories. The Liberator, freeing yourself and others from outmoded beliefs, or are you just imposing your own tyranny over the people that you are supposedly liberating? Are you a true liberator or just replacing it with a new rulership? The Lover, we have the great passion and devotion, but in shadow it can be obsessive and self-destructive. The Martyr is learning to just transcendent nature of service to yourself or a cause, but you can also play the martyr and it's a self-pity idea. The Mediator, so great for negotiating and that type of stuff, seeing both sides of an equation, but are you doing the negotiating for an ulterior motive? Also, this can, the Mediator, I think in shadow, because this is another one that I have where I see all the different sides, and that can paralyze you because you are making a firm stand because you're constantly seeing all the different aspects of things. Here we have the Mentor, of passing on wisdom, but if you are being the mentor to the degree in which the person can't kind of move on to their role they need to take into, you know, then that is not good, or false instruction. The Messiah, again, serving humanity and humility. You think of like a bodhisattva. But in shadow, it could be exaggerated sense that you're the only person that can help the situation, that you have to come in and save the day or it's not going to get done. Here we have the Midas and the Miser. You can see both that Midas touch or the Miser. So it can be good. You can be a creative ability to turn things into gold and can be sharing those things, or you can be hoarding the money and the emotions. Not just about money either. Being really afraid of losing the things that you have versus turning things into gold and actually using those to help other people. The Monk and the Nun, that selfless devotion, but it can be an excess of piety or else really judging those that are not in the same position that you are, or just judging the material world. Again, we have the Mother, a nurturing, patience, unconditional love, but you can also smother your children. You can abandon your children. You know, we have lots of examples in the world of that negative aspect of motherhood. The Mystic revels in intimate union with the divine, or you could be delusionally connected to the divine and not even being able to function in the real world. The Networker enhances unity and social awareness and connections, but it can also convey information only for personal gain or spreading negative things. The Pioneer is going out and creating what hasn't been done before, going off into the space of the final frontier, or you constantly have to move on and you can never stay with one thing. That can be not good either. The Poet expresses soul insights in symbolic language, or you can use that gift for negative or destructive effects. Same gift, you know, different applications. The Priest facilitates spiritual commitments and becomes a channel, or you can violate the trust of your community and be seduced by your own spiritual role. I always have a problem with the idea of a priest versus like we have the monk and the nun. That I don't have so much an issue with. The priest I have a little bit of an issue with because it is that inner, that channeler, or that, I've got the word in my head and it's not coming out. The intercessor. You know, does there need to be an intercessor between, you know, yourself and your divine? You know, you should be able to access that yourself, and you don't really need an intercessor. But then there are people that need that, and in some ways, a lot of things become intercessory. Even tarot. If you're a tarot reader, you are knowing the language of the cards, perhaps at a level that allows you to get that message that somebody may not be able to get get for themselves because it's very difficult to sometimes read for yourself, even if you're a reader. So that one is one of those I can definitely see the light and the shadow aspects of that intercessory nature that comes. The Prince, of course, is this powerful archetype, romantic charm and the potential for power, but using that power wrongly obviously can be difficult. The Prostitute, that's quite interesting because you have the challenge of surviving without negotiating the power of your spirit. Because this is, especially in the past, the idea of the prostitute is one that I actually did quite a lot of studies with in literature, because oftentimes the women had absolutely no control and or were simply trying to survive and simply trying to feed their children. They are doing what needs to be done. And so there is some degrees a sense of respect for someone who is in a horrible situation and is doing what has to be done in order to survive, in order for their children to survive. So say, you know, you obviously think about Fantine, and so you watch, read that book or Les Miserables or watch the thing, and you can see that there's a respect given, or there's a certain degree of respect given to somebody who is in this terrible position, thinking, of course, that their child is suffering and ill and doing whatever it must be done in order to help them. But that can also obviously be very negative, and there is a lot of other issues surrounding prostitution. But just in terms of an archetype, it can be very interesting. And as well as what I mostly studied in literature was that idea of where, to be honest, for the most degree, prostitutes are something that are created by others. And then that same person who is forced into that position is then denigrated because for something that they had no choice over. This certainly happened in certain time periods and still happens today in certain areas, in certain places. So it's a very interesting and complex archetype to have. The Queen, we have, of course, the same thing with the King. Regal, feminine, benevolent authority, but then you have the arrogant, challenging, controlling, demanding kind of person. The diva, even. The rebel, which we already talked about, is, you know, you're going to challenge authority, reject systems that aren't serving your needs, that type of thing. But sometimes there is legitimate authority that we can need to be working within that system of legitimate authority, or you're rebelling out of a fashion or a peer pressure because you like the idea of a rebel, but you're not actually being a rebel. The Rescuer provides strength and support to others in crisis, but you can do that assuming that you're going to get a reciprocation from them, or that you are keeping the person who is needy so that you can continue on to be this role of the constant rescuer. That idea of, oh, I'm totally lost it. Totally blanked. It's important too, and I completely am blanking on I know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, where you think you are supporting somebody, but you are actually enabling them, is kind of what I'm thinking of. The Saboteur. So this highlights your fear of self-empowerment and the change it would bring to your life. So this is letting you know that you're sabotaging yourself. So it's good to know this so that you can take care of it. But if you aren't aware of it, it's just self-destructive behavior, undermining yourself or undermining other people. The Samaritan, again, we have that idea of helping people that you would rather not have to help, like the Good Samaritan in the Bible. But in shadow, you could be doing it to get appreciation and making sure that people recognize. Obviously, a true Good Samaritan isn't doing it for recognition. Here we have the Scribe, preserving knowledge and information. But in shadow, we have altering facts, which we saw a lot, right? Where a culture might be subsumed. So say when the Christian scribes came into pagan Ireland and those areas, and in the pursuit of preserving, they changed them and modified them to more fit their ideology. So that can be used both ways. You know, history is written by the conquerors kind of idea. The Seeker, we have the thirst for wisdom and truth, but you can't commit because you're constantly seeking for new things if it's in shadow. The servant archetype, serving others can be, being of service of others can be a personality trait that is quite beautiful and quite powerful. But if you are doing it again to enable people or to stay in this role of kind of ever the loving servant kind of aspect, or it says using the lack of money as an excuse not to move forward instead of doing the things you need to move forward. So it's kind of using the term servant in different ways. It can be that actual servant, I'm going to be the spinster aunt, you know, kind of thing, and that's just my lot in life, versus somebody who is of service to others. The shapeshifter, skill at navigating different levels of consciousness and seeing the potential in everything, or projecting any image that serves your personal agenda in the moment. So that's a little bit of a difference. So we can be somebody who is fluid and can navigate these different situations, or we can be that person who is simply always being what is best suiting them at the time to fit in and not in a positive way. The slave, surrendering your power of choice to the divine with complete trust. I'm not sure if I would really think of that as slavery, but or giving your willpower to an external authority for fear of making your own choices. Again, this is a very complex one because very often people who are slaves and or who people have that archetype in their personality is because it started out as having not been a choice whatsoever. And so this becomes like prostitute, very complex and interesting archetype that isn't going to be able to be summed up quite that easily. The storyteller, the ability to experience and express life through stories and symbols. Obviously making up stories and making up stories that harm other people, that can be negative. The student, humility and devotion to knowledge and openness to lifelong learning. Or you can be pursuing destructive knowledge or never doing anything. It's just always getting the knowledge in but absolutely never doing anything with the knowledge that you have. The perpetual student. A teacher, ability to communicate knowledge, experience, skill, or wisdom, but you can manipulate or abuse students, or you can teach negative traits and destructive things. What are you teaching? The thief sheds light on the potential wealth within you that can never be stolen, or you could actually be a thief and be stealing money, ideas, affection, all different kinds of things. The trickster transcends conventions, stuffiness, and predictable behavior, or is manipulating others through duplicity or deceit. The trickster gods are quite interesting ones as well. Those are the ones I think that are so quite fascinating. Here we have the vampire. Of course, I'm glad they're getting some... I thought maybe we'd have... I'm going to have to add zombies. I'm going to have to add some monster ones in because those are really important archetypes. In fact, I'm surprised there's not a monster archetype. I'm going to have to add a monster archetype in, a zombie one about consumerism. Vampires are making you aware someone or something is draining your life force. Of course, the other is draining somebody else's. Can also be constant, chronic complaining and codependency. You're just a life sucking out the life of somebody. There's a lot more to vampires than that. When vampires became a monster, were being built, it had to do with a lot more than just that. It has a lot to do with transforming into something else. It has a lot to do with the blood transformation. It has a lot to do with sexuality even. So I think I definitely need to have a werewolf, a zombie, maybe just a generic monster one, because it's the mirror. It's the things, putting what we're afraid of in ourselves onto somebody else. Definitely going to have a monster one. The victim prevents you from letting yourself be victimized. If you understand that you're in a victim mentality, it helps you to stop that. Or are you going to play the victim in order to get sympathy and those kinds of things? The virgin, maintaining symbolic purity of heart and spirit, or it can be that eternal fear of intimacy and union with somebody else. Also, this is also very problematic because this can also, not problematic, I should say, very complex, as all of these are, but I think of like this, the idea of monetary value and just value in general being placed on virginity and all the things that engendered for a very long time. This is a very interesting archetype, very layered. the visionary, the capacity to envision what is not yet conceivable, and being willing to speak it, even though other people might think you're crazy. And then also, what if you're just selling that to the highest bidder, also using it for fear-mongering, the world is coming, that kind of thing. Compromising your vision to make it more acceptable. That's interesting. The warrior, of course, about strength and skill and discipline and toughness, but taking ethical principles for victory at any cost, and being indifferent to the suffering that you're inflicting in the pursuit of whatever it is you're trying to gain. So there we have, so on the top of my head, it's the monster ones that come up, is thinking, oh, we definitely need to add those in. So I'm glad that there's 6 ones that we can add our own archetypes, because there are some other interesting obviously she can't have put every single archetype in the world out there. So I'm going to definitely do some thought into that, because I will want to add in some of my own. So, let me just see how these shuffle. This is an 80 card deck. They shuffle really fine. Obviously that it's a little bit thick. Even though the cards are thin, we're still talking about 80 cards of larger cards. So these are, let's see, in comparison to a standard tarot card, they're not super tall, but they are definitely wider. When you think about a standard oracle, though, this is Margaret Peterson Tarot, but it is oracle size. You can see it's actually quite a bit smaller, shorter, and a little bit less wide than a standard oracle. So it's a nice size for an oracle deck, I think. I think this is a good size, actually. Now, obviously, I would personally have preferred, more imagery and less text. But given the nature of what this is, it isn't so much about the image. It's about the archetype and what that brings up, this, in many different images. So I actually don't mind. These aren't horrible images. They're not. I wouldn't purchase this for the image, but they do seem to reflect the archetype that they're trying to do. So for me, visually, this isn't a deck that I would pick because of the visuality. I would pick it more along the lines of because of the archetypes. Now, another one that I think maybe somewhat in the same vein as this that I'm interested in also is the Symbolon, although that's much more astrologically based. I thought this was much more wider. That's why I went with this one first. I'm obviously tempted to either do this gold because of the gold highlights on the side, because it needs something. We've got lots of color, and then we have lots of color, and then we have bright white sides, and that's when I don't like it. But we obviously have a variety of colors here, so you'd either be doing a variety of colors here, or you could do red or black. I don't really feel that. I'm kind of feeling probably more gold, because that's going to go with anything. But I need to get a new gold pen. So how would you use these? I mean, that would be the next question. Let's look a little bit into more how she actually has this set up to use. So she goes off of the basis here in terms of the guidebook that you should kind of pick a grouping of 12 archetypes that you resonate with. So she says that everybody has one of the child cards, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. That is in all of us. And so we can pick out the other 8 ones as they resonate with us, both positively and negatively, and kind of make up this 12 that you're going to kind of work with within yourself, and talks about, how you might work with those things in terms of self-examination, journaling work and that kind of thing. Other suggestions that she has to use with that is, obviously journaling and these kinds of things. Understanding that other things could come up, and pulling them as cards, and obviously that you can use these in conjunction with her idea of the sacred contracts, as well as her journal of inner dialogue. So that's pretty much all she has in terms of the book and using them, because it doesn't seem to really be set up to be strictly as an oracle deck. But I definitely feel like this is something that can be used as an oracle deck, because archetypes are something that come in, and that's what tarot is, right? Tarot is a bunch of archetype cards, 78 archetype cards, and of situations, people, all kinds of things, but they are basically archetype cards. And so this is just another way of tapping into those archetypes. And so, you know, if you come to a situation, you can do a simple spread. I mean, the first thing off the top of your head is something really simple. Okay, well, what energy for me is in light, and what energy for me is in shadow, right? So I could simply be looking at, if I'm in a particular situation, what is some insight that I need to gain about that situation? Well, in light can be that idea of communication, of the natural world, of natural connections. You can just kind of roll off of what would the nature child mean to you, that sort of freedom, that connection with all living things, and kind of think, how is that going to apply? In the what's in shadow, we could say, okay, is what I'm doing in pursuit of this cause causing more harm than good? What are my intentions? It can help me to ask the questions that the Avenger might bring up in a particular situation. And so that can be very helpful just as a two card draw. You could certainly do even a 3 card of past, present, and future. So we could say, okay, maybe I have some issues that I need to deal with surrounding the father archetype, both positively and negatively. Since we're really not looking light and shadow here, we're looking just in the past, there may be some issues surrounding the father archetype. And what does that mean to me? What does the father archetype say to me about this, about myself, if I'm doing this for myself? What does that say to me about my past? How do I see myself in a servant role right now? Am I delighting in serving others? Or am I just using this as an excuse to not move on? You know what I'm saying? We can use that in a present sense. Moving forward, we have that pioneering spirit. And I want to make sure, obviously, in the moving forward, that I'm doing it for the right reasons. That it's for that passion of doing, not because I just keep, you know, being the tumbleweed that just keeps moving on and on and on. So I just feel like these have a lot of ways. You could certainly use it in a reading as a final, okay, what is an overriding energy that we need to be aware of in this situation? And then we would be able to say, okay, well, you know, it's good to follow your intuition and things like that, but you know, you do have to do the work. You can actually employ both of the energies of the card within it. I really think that these could be very, very useful. I was working on a birth chart reading, actually, and then I was kind of digging around for reading for people using readings that people use for this. And you know what, I stumbled on one for a past life, and how this would be really good to actually add, because I do a past life reading, but I do quite, you know, it's several different things. I have the sort of the core one, and then I do other things just depending on what I find out in their birth charts. But this would actually be really good. I did actually a little bit just to see is that. So the one that I saw, you would sort of do like, who am I, which is kind of what I do anyways. I used the past life reading in the Margaret Peterson, in the Marielle Tarot. But this one had you say, okay, who are they? And then who are they what is their internal self, their external self, and their major work? Is kind of the questions that they use. So that would be actually a really neat addition to when I'm working with past life readings, because you know, you can think of them as the mother, right? Internally they had the aspects of the fool, externally they were the wounded child, and sort of their work is the prostitute. You know, obviously it doesn't mean it's literally a prostitute, but how does that, would that play into, especially when you do all the other things that I normally do with the reading? I think these would actually be fantastic addition to past life work, because that is working, well, everything's working with archetypes. So I did just think that, I thought, oh, that might be interesting to a type of reading to add in as well. But you know, again, any tarot deck and any oracle deck is working on the understanding and the laws of archetypes. It's all tapping into this archetypal energy that connects us to the collective unconscious across time and across space and across ethnicities. Archetypes are one of those things that crosses all boundaries, and so that that is what all Oracle and archetypes, or Oracle and Tarot does, is tap into archetypes. And this is just simply another very specific way of looking into it and thinking about those archetypes that I think personally is going to be fantastic. And I'm looking forward to using these in a reading, and with readings in a variety of different ways. So I'm quite, that was obviously just my first impressions with it, but I'm really, again, quite interested in giving these a try. And if you have these and use these, like I know Kasha does, and she really likes them, let me know what you do with them and how you use them and what you think about them. As I will be quite, and what if you've added extra cards in, what are they? Like for me, for sure, I'm going to have a monster card, a werewolf card, a zombie card. I got to get the monsters in, and then I can think, I'm going to have to sit and think about it, but I know that I'm, you know, probably some story type, although that, a lot of my story archetypes, probably a fairy one. The fae energy, I think, is a very specific energy there that I would want to tap into. So yes, I'm definitely going to, and maybe I'll do that and come back and show you the ones that I've done before I put this particular video up. But if you've used your blank cards, I'd love to hear what you've used them for in the comment section below. So thank you for watching.